in doing some of these trainings and teachings, just being around USA Swimming and being a stroke judge. And he's been a starter official for Hampton Heights for a few years too. So Dave, thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Dave is going to monitor the chat room for us tonight. So if you have questions, please use that chat room functionality. Put those questions in there. Dave will holler at me and say, Chris, shut up. We got to talk about this for just a second. Let's catch up and we'll go from there. And so please let us know what questions you've got, and I'll go ahead and get going. As I figure out Zoom. So a year away from work, right? I've been away from work for a year, and I've used Zoom about 3 times. So I'm a newbie at this, but I think we'll get through it. So you can see Dave and I have our emails on that front screen. If you would like a copy of tonight's presentation, or if you'd like a copy of the stroke briefing, please send me an email. I'll be happy to get that to you. And I also want to point out, I think a number of you know this, we're using a new software system this year called Swimmingly. You can get to their trainings on how to be a stroke intern official and how to use their software at swimmingly.app/training. So that's an important link to keep in front of you. So we'll talk about the stroke intern official. The most important thing is know the rules. That's kind of why we're here tonight, to just refresh your memories on that and make sure that you know the rules. Make sure that you get to attend the officials briefing. That's usually 20 minutes to 30 minutes before the start of the meet. You want to get to that so you can hear all of this again and get all of those rules back in your head. Importantly, this year is going to be to bring an Android or Apple phone with you to use during the meet. That's part of what Swimmingly does. All of the timing is going to be done on somebody's phone. All of our stroke judge entries, if we have disqualifications to make, are going to be done on our phones this year. So make sure to bring that phone. And then just kind of the mental checklist. Make sure you pay attention during the stroke briefing. Before the event starts, visualize the stroke. Okay, butterfly is 2 arms simultaneously brought over the water. It's a kind of a double leg kick. The feet are not are moving in tandem together. You want to focus on your jurisdiction. You don't need to overjudge. Don't look any more or any less than what you're supposed to be covering. We talk about watching your body language, knowing that you are on camera when you're on deck and people are watching how you're reacting. At that same time, please enjoy it. This is fun. We're volunteering. Nobody's getting paid for this, but it's a fun job. And to see these kids succeed and do well is really valuable to me, and one of the reasons I'm involved. And remember, always, this is just a key rule in our stroke and turn officiating. The benefit of the doubt goes to the swimmer. If you think you saw something but aren't exactly sure, you're welcome to talk it over with the starter or the referee, but the benefit of the doubt goes to the swimmer. Before you get to the meet, you want to make sure you're on time. We talked about that a little bit. Be attentive. Positive attitude is a big deal with this. A stroke judge that I've seen has a t-shirt that says, I'm the stroke judge. If you didn't like my call, you should have volunteered. Just trying to keep a positive attitude, keep it light and enjoyable. If you remember, we wear an orange vest. I think those are the vests that most folks, most teams have. We'll wear an orange vest as the identifying shirt for stroke and turn officials. And then you'll want to be ready and in position as you were requested to by the starter referee. They'll assign jurisdiction at the start and say maybe be there 5 minutes ahead of time. So you want to be there in position and on time. Then before each event, like I was saying, visualize the stroke. Okay, breaststroke is a cycle stroke. You think about this in your head. It's going to be an arm pull with a frog kick, not the butterfly kick on the breaststroke. So think about what the stroke is going to look like before you get to it. Remember the rule requirements of a legal stroke and the transitions, like on an individual medley, transitioning from backstroke to breaststroke. What does that look like? And again, always use benefit of the doubt observation protocol. After the start, make sure you're in position. You step up to the water and you're watching the stroke swum by the swimmers as they're in your jurisdiction. Observe those swimmers until they all depart your jurisdiction. You might have 2 that are out of your jurisdiction and 1 that's still in your jurisdiction. Stay in position so you can still monitor that swimmer. This is a good one too. Give equal observation to all lanes in your jurisdiction, even the empty ones. It feels kind of weird to be looking at an empty lane, but that's fair to the swimmers, because if there's an event with 3 swimmers in your 3 lanes and another event with only 1 swimmer in your 3 lanes, we don't need to be over judging that 1 swimmer. So you continue to watch empty water so that swimmers don't get over judged. When you do see an infraction, you want to raise your hand promptly. I see it, I want to call it, get that referee's or starter referee's attention so that you can see, so that they can see that you have an infraction. And we'll talk about this next step. You'll record the infraction as you're able to in swimmingly. You're still kind of watching the swimming happen, but you know you had an infraction in lane 2, it was at the turn, it was a 1-hand touch in the butterfly. And so you just kind of tap your phone to make that call, and the starter referee and the scorekeeper will see those come in and have a discussion about the call. If you need to, again, talk about that infraction with the starter referee. And during relay exchanges, the way to think about this, you want to make sure that the swimmer doesn't leave too early. So as their toes have left the block, are the hands of the swimmer in the water touching the wall? And that's how you know that the swimmer didn't leave too early. Any questions so far? Dave, anything we need to bring up or catch up on? Oh. I'll take that as a no. You're on mute, so.
Now it looks good. I was a little distracted with some of the questions, getting back on that, but everything sounds pretty good. The question that came up about swimmingly and discussing with starter referee, I don't know if we should. I believe we should still make the call after raising our hands. We should still have headsets, but I think Chris and I did discuss, setting the call in swimmingly first, and then that call can either be accepted or no call if there's not an agreement on what was visually seen.
Yeah, I think that's right, Dave. What I think we'd like to have folks do, go ahead and enter it in swimmingly, and then get on the radio and talk about it with the starter referee and get their opinion on it. Hey, here's what I saw. Starter referee can make sure you saw it the right way, or that it's legal or illegal, and then make the call from there.
One more thing. I mean, that goes back to just circling on this list. Go ahead and make the call. It can, after the discussion, there can always be a no call on it. And it's a good learning opportunity or a refresher. I know this is returning stroke judges. So, but again, not all calls can maybe be discussed and come to a conclusion that makes sense. So, go ahead and make the call, and then after the discussion, it'll be accepted or just no call.
Yep, thanks, Dave. And as I think about it, I get the benefit of being a year-round official, but I know a number of you just to get to officiate in the summertime. So it might have been 2 years since we've had one of these discussions. So please keep your questions coming. We certainly want to make sure people feel comfortable after we get out of this training. Next topic that I wanted to run through was what I've referred to as jurisdiction. It's going to be an interesting summer this summer, as we have a number of virtual meets. Dave and I and Kelly were talking about this earlier. There's a high probability that you might not only get 3 lanes, but that you might get 6 lanes, an entire end of a pool, or in some cases 8 lanes. Certainly try to avoid that as best as possible. So typically you get between 2 to all 8 lanes of a pool as your jurisdiction, as assigned to you by the starter referee at that meet. The reason we're having that discussion that we might only have 2 stroke and turn officials, 1 for each end of the pool, is because of the virtual meets. And for instance, if Hunters Hill is swimming with Hampton Heights, but one of the teams just isn't able to provide 4 stroke and turn officials for the entirety of the meet, the other team shouldn't be providing 4 stroke and turn officials for the entirety of the meet. It wouldn't be quite right to have one. Again, this goes back to overjudging. One of the teams will be overjudged, one of the other teams wouldn't be judged as well. The other thing you have to keep in mind is when you're watching that much water, when you're watching 8 lanes or 6 lanes, that's a lot of water to watch. And you're not going to catch everything, and that's okay, because we're not overjudging, we are not inspecting, we're observing. If you see an infraction, call it. If you don't see an infraction, you can't call it. So we do our best, and that's the point there. So that was the point about the virtual meets. It's going to be tough to have 4 folks on deck at all times in a bunch of these virtual meets. most fair to everybody to have the same stroke and turn judges at each side of that virtual meet. And again, no matter how much jurisdiction you have, even if there's nobody in lane 1 and nobody in lane 6, make sure to watch that open water so that nobody gets overjudged. Questions on jurisdiction? Yep. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I just want to point out, even, and this might be actually later on, part of your jurisdiction, a lot of these pools do have the bullnose tile along the edge. So, remember to step up to the edge so that you can see hand contact. If you're standing with behind that first piece of tile, you're probably not going to see hand contact. So, just make sure to step forward. The other part, just to iterate what Chris was saying about watching a lot of water. We've all been there. Some of us that are USA officials have been at very long meets where we're watching 8 to 10 lanes. So it does feel overwhelming, but on the other hand, you just do your best. So, don't stress out over that much water. Just do what you need to do. All right. Watch the lanes evenly. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and one other thought on position as I was thinking about this. So you'll get your jurisdiction assigned to you, and it might be lanes 4 through 6 at the turn end of the pool. The right way to watch lanes 4 through 6 is going to be behind at the end of the pool, not on the side of the pool. But the league made the decision a couple of years ago to keep our stroke and turn officials at the very ends of the pool, even in freestyle swims. I know USA swimming stroke and turn officials may be used to just having someone at one end of the pool, but I think we're having everybody stand at the very end of the pool as opposed to the side of the pool to watch any of those events. One reason that's important is if you do disqualify someone for an infraction and you're not in the right position, then that's grounds to get the disqualification overturned for having a stroke and turn official not in the right position. Very quickly, I have just a couple slides on recording an infraction, and I have a couple screen grabs from what the Swimmingly app will look like on your phones as you're using this. So once the starter starts the event, this is what your screen will look like on your phone. And then, as I understand it, it's going to be the same on Android and Apple phones. And you simply, if you see an infraction, you'll raise your hand, kind of wave or get the stroke and turn official or the starter referee's attention so that he knows to expect something. And then you'll tap on the phone to disqualify a swimmer. That'll bring you to a screen that shows you the lanes available. It also shows you the heat number up top there and the lanes available. And it'll say, okay, this is a breaststroke event. So what's the disqualification we're going to call? Where did you see it? Did you see it at the start? Did you see it during the swim? Did you see it during the turn? For instance, a one-hand touch at the turn instead of a two-hand touch, or at the finish. So you'll start to make those selections. You'll select the infraction that you saw, for instance, a butterfly kick during the breaststroke or the scissors kick. Once you make that, and this is a scrollable list, if the list is longer than what you see on this page, you'll select it, hit save and continue. And that submits the disqualification to the starter referee and the scorekeeper in order to make the judgment on whether or not to accept. That's about as deep into this as I can go, given my experience. There is the swimmingly.app/training. They have some outstanding training videos for everybody to take a look at. And if you want to get more training on that, please do. I believe most teams are going to be having practice meets where you'll get to practice with this technology. We're also running a training at Hunters Hill Swimming Pool on the 22nd. Is that right, Kelly? Next Saturday morning is we're going to have to change the time, but the Swimmingly team will be there with us too to help out a little bit. So that'll be a good experience for anyone who wants to join and see actual meet operations and how that runs. So just reminders on being the stroke and turn official before we get into the kind of stroke briefing and just a refresher of what everything looks like. Please observe and don't inspect. One reason for that is if you're just staring at one swimmer and really focused on their swim, the other swimmers aren't getting judged. And so again, overjudging. We want to make sure we judge every swimmer equally. And again, the benefit of the doubt goes to the swimmer. This is a line I've heard a couple of times: call what you see but make sure you see what you call. You don't want to call a phantom disqualification, but if you see a disqualification, please call it. And the point there is, we don't, in case of our virtual meets, we want the swimmers to be judged equally. We don't want to take it easy at the start of the year saying, you know, it's early, they don't know how to swim it yet, I'm not going to call a disqualification. We want to make sure the swimmers are learning how to swim the strokes appropriately, that they don't end up making finals while swimming the stroke illegally all summer. So always make sure that we DQ. We're really doing the kids a favor to help them learn how to learn the stroke successfully and enjoy swimming. There will be occasions where some small children are kind of upset about getting disqualified. My approach towards telling them when we've had to disqualify them is to just kind of kneel down, get on their same level and say, hey, give me 5. That is super hard to swim. I had to disqualify you in the butterfly because your feet didn't stay together as you swam all the way down the pool. I know you understand that. You're going to work hard and you're going to get it next time. And I think that's a good approach to helping little kids get over their fears of being DQ'd. Also helps them get over the fears of being talked to by a stroke and turn official. We're nice people, I like to think. So let's treat the kids as humans and tell them they did a great job. If someone has disqualified in your lane, say you're at the turn end of the pool, and you know that someone called a disqualification at the other end of the pool on a lane where you are also now seeing a disqualification in your jurisdiction, please make the call again. We want to make sure that, first of all, we're not absolutely sure that the call at the other end of the pool was for the lane that you're now seeing a disqualification, but we always want to record the disqualifications as we see them. Again, raise your hand, get the starter referee's attention when you make a call. Let's keep the chatter on the radio to a minimum unless you need to talk about a call. If you need to talk about that with the starter referee, then let's talk about it. Or the starter referee will reach out to you and ask a question about what did you see on that call? Why did we think about it? And that'll help them decide to accept or overturn the call. This one's real important, especially this summer with our virtual meets. We're going to all have to kind of adapt to meet conditions and help where requested. The starter referee should be rotating the stroke and turn officials. Again, just to get different eyes on different water and make sure everybody gets judged equally. But it's great if we can all be very adaptable and help where requested on deck. And hopefully you all learn to enjoy it. I've come to enjoy it. There's certainly some nerves at the beginning, but as you do it more often and more often, the meet slows down and it becomes a lot more enjoyable. And you get to be on deck watching your kids swim, and that's a great place to be. And I'll pause for questions again before we get into the stroke briefing. Or Dave, anything else you might want to add?
So a couple of questions have come through on the Swimmingly. So compatible devices, iOS devices. So it was basically built for iOS. The starter, timer, and judging roles are on your iPhones and iPads and iPods. Your scorekeeper looks like they're supporting mostly iPad, probably because of the dimensions of the screen. So I don't think you can run anything for scorekeeper on a phone size view. So plan on having an iPad mini for that. So unfortunately, it is mostly driven by iOS. So your teams will have to acquire it. I would recommend from the IT world, you don't have to have it activated. So there are third-party refurbished ones that you can purchase inexpensively compared to buying one brand new, older versions of it, and that might be an option for you. So a local shop, Micro Center, does have refurbished old iPhones. You probably can find them on Amazon. Again, they only need wireless. They don't have to be activated, which really kind of keeps it simple. Android, only the timer role is supported on Android at this point, okay? So it is my understanding that they are going to develop for that. They mentioned that the other night in the lessons, but I did not, or in the trainings, but I did not stick around to hear what their timeline was. I don't think they had one reported yet.
Thanks, Dave. So that's a pretty important correction, and to know that we'll need to, for stroke and turn officials, we'll need to have an iOS device. If that's an issue for you, I think please bring it up to your team's parents, and we can talk about that. The team should be buying perhaps one of those refurbished devices like you talked about, Dave. Does not need to be active on a cellular network, just needs to have Wi-Fi access to be used at the pool.
Yep. Let me just review any notes here. Anything we went over just before we get into all the other information. I think we're good. So yes,
Okay.
continue on. I don't have anything else.
Okay, we'll jump into the stroke briefing, and this is stolen pretty straight from the USA Swimming officials' stroke briefing that they would get before a USA Swimming meet. Starting again with just freestyle and keeping it about to the simplest stroke we can think of. The start is important though. It has to be a forward start. There may be situations where a swimmer asks the starter referee if they can start in the pool, or if the coach has asked the starter referee if the swimmer can start in the pool, and that's okay. We just need to make sure that that swimmer is doing a forward start at the start. Then for freestyle, any stroke or kick can be used. The swimmer does have to surface before the 15-meter line at the far end of the pool. And some part of the swimmer must touch the wall at the completion of each length or required distance. It is true that if a swimmer swims at the other end of the pool, misses the wall on their flip turn, swims halfway back, someone gets their attention and tells them to go back to the other end and touch the wall, that's a legal touch. Now you'll call an infraction when you see them miss that, and the coach or someone might be yelling at them to go back and touch, and that's legal. That's okay. It is illegal for them to finish the race before they have made that touch at the other wall. Also, other ways to not swim this stroke legally would be to bounce on the floor. My son got DQ'd in one of his first Rocky Mountain Swim League races. He's finishing up an 8 and under 4x25 yard freestyle relay, and he's 2 feet off from the wall and stands up and jumps towards the wall. He propelled himself towards the wall by pushing off of the floor, and that's a disqualification. One common thing you'll see amongst the new swimmers who are just doing it for the first time, they might be dragging themselves down the lane line. So propelling yourself forward while hanging on the lane line is not allowed either. Any questions on freestyle before I move forward?
We might want to clarify that touching the bottom, touching the wall is not an infraction. Propelling yourself off of those is an infraction.
Thank you, Craig. That's a real good point. It's propel forward that's the problem. If the kid is standing at the wall on the floor and touches it with his hand, he did not propel himself forward.
And same with the lane rope. They can hold onto the lane rope, but they can't pull themselves with the lane rope.
Dave, was there anything else that popped up in there? Okay,
Nope. So
let's talk about backstroke. So on the backstroke, this is not a forward start. It's an in-water facing the start end with hands on the gutter or the starting grips. You cannot put your toes above the lip or bend them over the gutter. They do not have to be under the water, but they may not be bent over the gutter. I don't know that we have wall pads in the league, that anybody has those, and I don't know that anybody's using backstroke ledges at this point in our recreational swim league. So I don't know that B and C are issues. And again, the stroke can be any style. As long as they are on their back, meaning shoulders are at or past vertical toward the back. The swimmer does have to come up above the water before they hit that 15-meter line at the far end of the pool. And this is a new thing that Dave and Kelly and I have been discussing a little bit. We did see a policy on the Rocky Mountain Swim League site that we're no longer following the CASO rule that allows for a non-continuous backstroke turn. So the way this rule is written is during the turn, the swimmer may go past vertical to the breast, may use a continuous single or double arm pull to initiate the turn, but it all has to be continuous. There's no pause in the turn at the backstroke flags. And again, some part of the swimmer must touch the wall at the completion of each length. In the backstroke, if they finish that turn and they've missed the wall, they cannot scuttle towards the wall to then touch it. That's not going in the right direction, not part of the backstroke. So that would be an infraction. And at the finish, again, some part of the swimmer must touch the wall while they're on the back. One thing that I tell timers in our timer briefings is you stop the watch as soon as any part of that kid touches the wall. The timers aren't there to judge a two-hand touch. Lots of times with little kids, the first thing that touches the wall is going to be their head. And that's something that they'll see, but that's part of a legal swim here in the backstroke. Questions on backstroke? Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, this is Ann Heyer. I put a question in the chat box, but just wanted to clarify on the backstroke turn. The swimmer may turn. So my question is, or I just want to clarify one more time as a reminder to myself, if the swimmer turns on their stomach just before the wall, as if they're going to do a flip turn, but instead touches the wall with his or her hand and then pushes off on their back, that is a DQ, correct? Because they were on their stomach when they touched the wall with their hand as opposed to doing a flip turn, or not?
Yeah, I see head shaking. Go ahead, Dave.
Craig, did you want to chime in on that one? I saw your head shake too.
Oh, you're on mute,
You're on
Craig.
mute.
Sure. If you initiate your flip turn, but you run out of room to execute your flip turn, that is not a penalty. You are fine. So obviously that's not what the kids are trying to do. But if you turn over in order to execute that flip turn and suddenly you're there at the wall, or you just change your mind, you're okay. Now you still have to take into account the new change with it all being a continuous move. And that's going to be new for us. But just flipping over, even if you don't finish your turn, your flip turn, you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chris and Dave, this is Eric Steinberger. Just real quick, I'm reading the word may as a very distinct term. They do not have to use this single movement. I mean, if they continue doing what they've done in the past with just floating to the wall, that's fine. I mean, we're saying may here.
Right, correct. If they come in on their back and they swim with both arms at their side, and as some you'll see make contact with their head, that's legal. If they happen to, as the current example is, they roll over on, they start to roll over, and then they initiate that turn, even though it's kind of wonky, that's legal. What we're really looking for is that, turning onto your stomach out at the flags and just kicking in like a torpedo. That's the non-continuous. I mean, that's the easiest one to describe. And I think this new ruling, if you're not familiar and have been on a USA deck, it's going to take you a little time to see it. So, once you first see it, you're going to go, I think that was it. And then as the season goes along, you'll be able to be more comfortable making that call. But correct. I
think I'm saying that the word may leaves it as this is not an absolute.
Yes.
So it does not mean that they have to use a continuous single turn. I think RMSL is moving in the direction of wanting them to do a continuous turn with the R movements, just like USA Swimming wants, but this is saying that it is not required.
The interpretation of this rule is that they may flip onto their stomach and they may use a continuous single arm or continuous double arm, but they have to be continuous. So it's the may single or may double arm. So it's not that if they go onto their stomach that we just let that go. It is a continuous movement.
All right, it's on interpretation of how you read it.
I would beg to, I would get better clarification, because I read it as they don't necessarily it's like the olden days. They don't necessarily have to continuously turn or pull down, and that it is just an option.
Okay. Right.
And I don't know, but do you see that? Like, that's exactly how I read it.
Okay.
Well, then chase that, guys, and thanks for bringing that up.
That would go with the high school rules then. So yeah.
Well, the way I read it is they may use a turn. They may not use a turn. They may swim in and touch the wall on their back. But if they do use a turn, it has to be continuous or continuous simultaneous double arm pull. If they utilize a turn, it has to be continuous.
I'd like to get clarification for everybody because we've got a lot of teams here to be able to. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can see it both ways.
Thanks, guys. Okay, other backstroke questions? Okay, let's talk about the breaststroke. Again, forward start. And just a note on the forward start, again, you might see small kids not want to get up on the block. So a forward start is legal from the side of the pool. In the breaststroke, the body is kept on the breast, shoulders at or past vertical towards the breast. This is a cycle stroke, and the cycle is one arm pull and one leg kick in that order. Simultaneous arm movement must take place in the same horizontal plane. After the start and each turn, one arm stroke may be completely back to their legs. So at the start, you'll see kids pull their arms all the way down past their hips to their legs. And at the turn, you might see that. The head must break the surface at the widest part of the second pull. Recovery by the hands from the breast on, under, or over the water. Doesn't matter where their hands are, if they're on, under, or over the water. Elbows are under the water for the entirety of the cycle stroke, except for the last stroke before the turn or finish. During each complete cycle, some part of the head shall break the surface of the water. The kick. After the start and each turn, prior to the first breaststroke kick, a single butterfly kick is permitted. Movement of the legs are simultaneous vertically and horizontally. The feet are turned out during a propulsive part of the kick. No alternating scissors or butterfly kick, except as stated, is allowed. At the turn, the shoulders at or past vertical toward the breast when the feet leave the wall. So again, always on the breast. The touch shall be made with both hands separated and simultaneously at, above, or below the water surface. At the last stroke before the turn and at the finish, an arm stroke not followed by a leg kick is permitted. The head may be submerged after the last arm pull prior to the touch, provided it breaks the surface of the water at some point during the last complete or incomplete stroke cycle preceding the touch. That's an awful lot. This is our longest, the most words on any of our slides on the stroke briefing. So I'll pause there and let's see what questions there are. And I will definitely recommend to folks, there should have been some links sent out with, oh, don't take my picture, Tiffany. I hope it's not looking at me. Hopefully, yeah, you can take the picture of the slide, that's fine. Hopefully you all received links to watch some USA Swimming training videos on how to officiate these different strokes. They are fantastic. Please do watch those. They're about 5 minutes a piece, and it's well worth your time to invest just a little bit of time to watching those training videos. So questions on the breaststroke? Okay. I literally thought this would be the hard one and not the backstroke, but the backstroke does have the question on the flip on the turn, how to do the turns. That's fine. Okay, moving on to butterfly. Again, a forward start. The body is kept on the breast, shoulders at or past vertical towards the breast. Multiple kicks are permitted, but the first arm pull must bring the swimmer to the surface. Some part of the swimmer must break the surface throughout the race, except they may be submerged after the start and each turn, not more than 15 meters where the head must break the surface. And just a quick note on the 15-meter line, if you have questions on that, it may vary by pool. Talk about that with your starter referee. The arms, shoulder to wrist, are brought forward over the water and pulled back simultaneously. The kick is a simultaneous up and down movement. There's no alternating scissors or breaststroke kicking movements. And at the turns and finish, the shoulders have to be past vertical toward the breast when the swimmer leaves the wall at the turn, and the touch at the turn and the finish shall be made with both hands separated and simultaneously at, above, or below the water surface. So let that sink in for just a minute and see if there's any questions on butterfly.
I'll just jump in real quick on that arms to shoulders, or I mean, arms or shoulders to wrist. We often use the term, it can be a, what is it? a boat, but not a submarine. So you need to see all of the top of the arm above the surface of the water. So it's not the, oh, I saw a forearm above water. It's got to be shoulder to wrist above the water. Now that doesn't mean that the underneath part of the arm or, your bony elbow has to clear it. It can be a boat, but it cannot be a submarine. So you do need to see the full arm.
Again, this is another good USA Swimming training video to watch. One of the links that was sent out for the meeting. Anything else come in, Dave?
Not on the strokes, but we probably circling back to what we should do about calling in the your observation. So, is it recommended to raise your hand and then call it in, or to enter it and call it in? So, let me read that more specifically. So go ahead and I'll read up on this.
Okay. Next one is just talk about individual medley. Again, a forward start and an individual medley. And the rules for each stroke applies while the swimmer is swimming that portion of the individual medley. 1/4 of the event distance is swum in the prescribed stroke in the order for individual medley of butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, and freestyle. You cannot swim in the style of any of the other 3 strokes during the freestyle leg. During the freestyle leg, the swimmer must be on the breast, shoulders at or past vertical towards the breast, except when executing a turn. As for the kick, the rules for each stroke apply. On turns, intermediate turns, they're going to conform to the turn rules for the stroke. So if they're swimming a 200 IM, the 50 portion of the breaststroke, during the breaststroke turn, you're going to judge that turn based on the rules for a breaststroke turn. During freestyle to freestyle turn, the swimmer must return to breast prior to any kick or stroke. Otherwise, if the swimmer starts kicking or stroking while their shoulders are past vertical towards their back, they're in essence swimming backstroke, which would be swimming more than 1/4 of the event distance in the order of each stroke. Let's see, transition turns conform to finish rules for the stroke being finished and start rules for the stroke being started. During the breaststroke to freestyle turn, the swimmer must return to breast, shoulders at or past vertical towards the breast prior to any kick or stroke. Some part of the swimmer must touch the wall at the completion of each length or required distance. So put very simply, you judge each leg of the individual medley according to the rules that we just discussed with respect to freestyle, backstroke, breast, and fly. Very much oversimplified, but any questions on individual medley judging?
It might be easier, Dave, if, rather than you having to read it, just asking clarification for the breast to the free, like the Ryan Lochte rule that you just said. US swimming, you can kick to your first kick can bring you to the freestyle position or vertical past. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know. I know. I just want to know if it's the same as the USA rule or if we have leniency in RMSL.
Tiffany, I'll have to get clarification on that. It's the right question, right? My understanding, even in some stroke briefings I've been in for USA Swimming, is if they start to propel before they're on their chest, that's not appropriate, and that would be an infraction in USA Swimming.
That's what I mean, but it's just your legs.
No, it's your arms too.
Are you sure? Because I think it's just your legs.
It's any propulsion motion past vertical towards your back is an illegal move. You must be past vertical towards the breast before you make your first propulsive motion. So if you came on your back and reached to turn yourself onto your stomach, that's illegal. If you kick on your back, that's illegal. But if you're past vertical towards the breast and make your first propulsion, whether it's kick or stroke, then you're
Okay.
legal.
All right. I
That
think
is,
I was under the impression it was just your kick that had to make sure you couldn't kick until you're onto your stomach. And so I like that even that's brought up because being that I do this all the time, I need to clarify for my own self.
Tiffany, the way I'm going to chase down those clarifications is make sure triple check. I'm using the absolute latest stroke briefing
Yeah,
document from
Yeah,
USA
I'm gonna
Swimming.
go get out my US book right now
Yep.
and, yep. Okay,
yeah, I think we covered that in the last state meet 2020, right before we got shut down. And we were talking about that propulsion motion because you had to be
Okay.
completely on your pass vertical towards the breast when you left the wall. And then they made that adjustment in, I think, like January. Well, they called it in like November of 19, but I think they made the adjustment in January of 20, something
Okay.
like that. Don't
All right.
don't
Thank
go
you.
looking up the dates, please.
I'm not, I just should know more, but I don't.
That's an odd one.
Okay,
Other questions on IM, folks? And yeah, please don't feel like you have to reach out to Dave with the chat if you've got something to spit out on them.
I might have missed it anyway. I'm good.
Okay, I'll jump on relays. In the freestyle relay, the freestyle rules apply, and each swimmer in the relay must swim 1/4 of the distance. In the medley relay, just like in the IM, the rules pertaining to each stroke apply, and each swimmer must swim 1/4 of the distance. It's a different order from IM. In the medley relay, it's backstroke, breaststroke, butterfly, and freestyle. You may not swim in the style of the other 3 strokes during the freestyle leg. And again, this is just like our last discussion that we'll chase down. During the freestyle leg, the swimmer must be on the breast, shoulders at or past vertical toward the breast, except when executing a turn. Swimmer must return to breast, shoulders at or past vertical towards the breast prior to any kick or stroke. On the takeoffs, the swimmer's feet must remain in contact with the starting platform until the incoming swimmer has touched the finish wall or pad. And again, you look for toes to leave the block and then to see if hands are on the wall as you're judging that. Questions on judging the relays? Okay, so at this point, I just have a couple other slides to run through. Are there any other questions that we need to catch up and talk about? Go ahead, Dave.
So both Chris, Tiffany, Craig, I think that's a common theme in USA Swimming. Watch the feet to the hands. So when they leave the wall, you're watching the feet to the hands. When they do starts, relay starts, it's feet, then hands. So I think that it took me a while to get which one do I look at, the hands first and then the feet leaving. So I think keep that in your mind that that's a common theme. When they leave the wall, you're scanning from the feet to the hands. When they're leaving the blocks on relays, it's feet, then hands. They just happen to be different people, but same concept.
To make that easier, what I always tell my stroke judges is go feet first.
Oh,
Just maybe
okay.
a little alliteration there that might help them watch the feet first, then look at the hands.
Perfect. Great. Let's see. So there's been a lot of questions about the Swimmingly app and when to enter it. I would say until we get a little bit more in the training, what I've seen of it, and I have not demoed it directly myself, I think we do need to think about, at this point, staying along with our current habits, which is make the call, raise your hand, make your call, whether it's calling it in. I think we all adopted headsets in the last actual year, and then continue to watch your jurisdiction, and then we enter it in. I mean, it'd be no different than a piece of paper, right? You would enter that piece of paper in, or write it down at the end of the event, or when it was accepted. I think that might clarify things or make things a little bit easier. I know we're holding a clipboard instead, and we're looking at a phone. Supposedly with the kit, there's lanyards to keep your phone intact, so it's not going to go flying in the water. So, I think at this point, I would recommend, and again, any deck ref or starter or referee can make their own call for that swim meet. But right now, I would make the recommendation of make the arm signal the call it in, wait for your acceptance, or at least write it up. And then, whether the acceptance is done then or by the deck ref afterwards, that's kind of a nuance of it.
That makes me happy to hear you say that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dave, I think that's a good call. And will that mean, and my only question is, does anyone else see my call on their phone? They don't? I don't know.
I have not been a part of that portion. That'd be a good item to test.
Only because if you are on that turn lane and you are calling something in and that official on the other end is supposed to be notifying the swimmer, if you don't make that call on a headset and you're just doing it, on your phone, I'm not sure they would know you've even made that call.
Right. I think that's a good point. I think there's still some things with Swimmingly that, Chris and I were chatting, that it'd be great that officials could just make their call and then the ref hits accept or no call. And then that's why it's official. Just like we had, a lot of us adopted the scribes and maybe the extra, and I know that everybody doesn't have this, but we adopted the scribes and the extra starter deck ref with us. That person became the person to make the call. So it didn't really matter if you knew the call was being transmitted to the other end. They saw it at the referee starter end, and then somebody made the actual, kind of like a chief judge at USA Swimming, where somebody else goes in and makes the contact with the swimmer. Because I think the goal of Swimmingly is going to really impede that practice, because if you watch their videos, they even talk about, hey, swimmers come in, the starter's already ready, that person that when that last swimmer touches the wall, you send the next kids. I know we're kind of in that habit with USA Swimming that there's still some time zone, but like Swimmingly was like, hey, you can hit that button and everybody's clock will catch up once they enter in the swimmer's ID. So, that does change the dynamics of officiating completely, of being able to notify the swimmer. So
I think that going with that kind of speed might work for most of our heats.
right,
On 8 and under breaststrokes, no.
right, correct.
Exactly. When you have a 8 or 4 lane jurisdiction and everyone DQ'd, you're going
Right.
to take some time. And I do think it's important for those little kids to hear, be notified.
Agreed. My only input on that would be, you will get the larger teams that really want to start cranking through it. So yeah, that does need to be communicated, that, hey, on those heats that have a high number of DQs, the starter and referee should slow the meet down and take care of that, because that does help the swimmer. You're not helping the swimmer by getting through the meet faster by any means.
I think part of this is we're all going to be learning and adapting as we learn. So hopefully teams are going to do a practice meet. I know some teams worked with it last summer and had real great success with it. So that's good to hear. But we'll adapt and we'll figure out the right things. And then maybe midway through the season, we need to be trading emails with each other to say, this worked great at our pool. Why don't we try it like this and push that around? Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. So, we all know that stroke judges is probably the hardest volunteer shift to fill. So we are still diligently working and pleading with people to please sign up to be a stroke judge. You don't have to be a swimmer. You don't have to know anything about swimming. We will teach you. But I was just looking at the schedule. Is there something, like if we get a stroke judge the day before a meet, what does that look like? And how do we make sure that is legit? We've even incorporated something in our own pool of having our coaches even do let's get all the stroke judges together and we will do here's legal strokes, here's illegal strokes. As a stroke judge, tell me what was wrong. And as I am the lead of the stroke judges, I'm coordinating all of that. because it's one extra thing that the new stroke judges can have. But to make sure that it's RMSL legal as far as stroke judges, are there more trainings that are going to happen, or is this it?
So Beth, I am going to run a training for brand new officials this Saturday at 10 in the morning at Hunters Hill Pool. I know that's still a little early. It's about par for when we usually run that training in the season, but it's still a couple weeks before we go. The following Saturday, I think it's going to be at 9 a.m. I think it's posted at 1 p.m., but at 9 a.m. we're going to be doing a swimmingly training, and I'd be happy to meet with any more stroke judges at that point in time if you want and talk about it.
I mean, we're hoping to have everybody in place, especially since it's a different year this year of just work. You know, we may not need as many stroke judges, but we are running into an issue where we have a lot of new people. So that's our issue right now.
At the end of the day, there is nothing I can do to stop somebody at some pool from putting a person who doesn't know how to stroke judge at the end of the pool and calling them a stroke judge. The best I can ask for you to do is please try to train them to the best of your ability. I love the approach that your own team is doing some mentoring and training. I think that's great. But I'm not going to be going to 10 different pool sites during the season to ask everybody if they went to trainings and to check on that, right? So we just look for fairness and think about the other teams in the league.
All right, so it's not like years have passed where we had to like, here's your training date, and here's your like certificate, here's your first.
I don't have the time to track that. You know, it's just not something I'm going to be doing, and I'm looking to the individual parents to kind of manage that in the right way.
Isn't there a requirement for to basically shadow another stroke judge for one shift before you can actually call it yourself? I know on our team we've had that as a practice. I don't know if that's something that's mandatory across the league or not, but we've always kind of gone along with you've got to have at least one shift where you're shadowing someone to understand how it works.
I think that is strongly recommended and is so helpful for that new stroke and turn official too, right? To get some time on deck with someone who's done it before and get to learn in a live setting without having to stand there on their own first. I think it's great. I don't know that it's mandatory in the league, but it's certainly something we should strive to do with our new stroke and turn officials.
Yeah, and I think even if you have the same day, if you have someone that all of a sudden you rope someone in, they're going to do it for the first time the next day, maybe even just have them shadow the first shift and then they can do it themselves on the second shift. You know, just
I highly recommend that. And I also, in years past, Glenn Malloy, you know, he had someone kind of just randomly just helping the stroke judges with questions. It's really, really helpful when you're newer, walking around.
Let me add in here in the issue, in the interest of fairness, again, don't let two stroke judges, that is the experienced one and the newbie, both be watching the lanes and calling disqualifications. That's twice as many eyes on those swimmers as it is on the other swimmers.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. We do need to avoid over judging. So in those mentoring situations, you'd have the main stroke judge be calling those.
And that's why we've actually incorporated doing just a kind of a stroke judge meeting with the coaches, and then when they do the legal, the illegal, and everything else, so show us what was wrong, show us whatever. Because also we're never going to get somebody to sign up for those shifts. We don't have enough volunteers. So if one of your shifts is a mentor, that's really hard to fill because now we have to fill that shift with somebody else, and so they're doing double the time. So that has actually worked really well for us. Just meet at 5 o'clock at the pool, and we're going to have a couple coaches there, and they're going to kind of mix it up a little bit. And you tell us what it looks like. And then if you have somebody, we have the head stroke judge, which would be me, like raise your hand if you need help. And I'm always constantly watching. So there's that is one option too, because otherwise we would never fill our stroke judge shifts.
And Beth, I'd point them to the links to the videos on USA Swimming sites that we've seen that walks through each of those. What does this look like? It's pretty good trainings on that. I think they're YouTube videos. Okay, I think that's all I had for this evening, folks. I appreciate every one of you coming out, asking questions. The whole discussion has been superb. Again, you can send me emails, kjreese@yahoo.com if you have questions. I've got a couple things to follow up on, and so I'll get that at least out to the parent officials for each team, and then we'll spread that out to the stroke judges from there.
Yes, I think so. Oh.
I'm just gonna chime in there. There was one question about Swimmingly app and training. On the Swimmingly app training, scroll to the bottom. There is starter, deck ref, or starter, a referee, timer, and stroke and judge referee training at the bottom. So, and they also covered in various places of the other videos. There's also been the buzz about using the scribe, calling it in. I think a lot of people that have been doing this a while have their maybe they have great ideas and maybe their own direction that they'd like to take it, and that might be something that we want to follow up on after the first couple of meets, because everybody's going to have their own little nuance, what worked and what didn't work, and maybe we could have some posting center for that. I don't know, some absolute, hey, don't do this because this was a fiasco at our pool, or this worked out great. So, I think we're just going to have to kind of walk through it the first couple of weeks of the season and work with each other for some best practices on Swimmingly.
Okay, thanks again, Dave, for joining me. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and your time, and we're excited to get back and have a season this year. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.